To the desk, Attorney Kim Baer. She's here to talk about something that a lot of folks find uncomfortable to talk about, and a lot of people say, well, why do you need that? And you're here to explain why we need a prenup.
Exactly. So first of all, what is a prenup? And in Iowa, a prenuptial agreement is a written agreement that you're going to enter into within six weeks of getting married.
Oh, so, you can do it afterwards?
Well, no, within 6 weeks before.
Forward, okay. I didn't understand. Okay.
Yes, yep. So 6 weeks before you get married, and you're going to list out all your assets, you're going to list out all your debts, and so it's full disclosure between the two parties as to what everybody owns, what they owe. And then the purpose of the prenup is really to set forth what you're going to do if things go south. And you're exactly right. People are very uncomfortable. I've been in situations where I'm representing the person who's been asked to sign one.
Right.
I've represented the person who says, hey, you know, would you please sign this?
But Kim, if you really love someone, you shouldn't have to sign one of these prenuptial agreements.
Exactly.
What would you tell that person?
Well, and this is what I tell people. So it used to be Iowa law. We felt pretty comfortable saying, all right, if you own a farm and you and I got married, you probably are under the assumption that if 10 years from now we got divorced, that you're going to take your farm and that's going to be your own property. And that's not really what Iowa law is. And Iowa law is that it's equitable division. So the court's going to look at everything you own, including what you owned and what you brought into the marriage, to see whether or not any of that needs to be divided. And so the problem is that if you own, let's say you have a family farm, and it's been in the family forever, and during the marriage, and you don't have a prenup, and during the marriage, your spouse helps you manage the farm, maybe keeps the books, and 15 years from now you get divorced, that spouse may have a claim to some of that farm. And so a lot of times, the reason why people don't want to sign a prenup is because they think, well, I'd never make a claim to your farm, and that's not even an issue. But, you know, when things go south, things get a little messy, and so we tell people all the time, okay, do you really want to make a claim against this person's farm? Because if you don't, and if that's what you're telling them, then let's put it in writing. So that's one way to handle it.
When did no-fault divorce start in Iowa, and how does that factor into all this, if at all?
Well, it doesn't really factor into it. I mean, we've had no-fault divorce forever. I mean, I've been doing this for 26 years, and so we've had it before I became a lawyer. And really, it's equitable division. That's what really impacts it.
Now, is it equitable division if someone is not involved? You mentioned the farm situation. We're going to use that for an example. Say the spouse did not assist in running the farm, but they were just off doing their own thing, which may have been the reason they got divorced anyway. But anyway, would they still have rights to half the farm? Well,
you know, in today's world, that farmland 20 years ago, what it was worth then and what it's worth now, dramatically different.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, big time. And so it may be that the person says, you know, look at how much it's increased in value since we got married, and we don't have an agreement in place. And if there's no other big asset, the court may say, well, look, this is during the marriage, this is how much it increased in value, and that's a marital asset. I mean, so that's just it. I mean, if you've got a farm, if you've got a business, you know, a lot of times people have businesses. I just talked to a client a couple weeks ago who has a landscaping business. He said, oh, great news, I'm getting married. I said, okay, let's talk about a prenup. And he said, oh, I don't really need a prenup. It's my business. She has a job. And I said, okay, well, let's say the business is worth $100,000 right now, and 10 years from now it's worth $500,000. There's an argument that during that marriage, that increase of $400,000 is a marital asset. He said, you mean she could get some of my business? And I said, well, yeah, she could. So it all depends on what's fair when you're getting divorced. And the other thing that I think people don't realize is that prenuptial agreements cannot address or regulate alimony or child support. So, you know,
that's not even taken into account.
Exactly. It's not even taken into an account. And if it is in the agreement, it's not going to be valid. So you still have that right at the end of a marriage. So you're not, by signing a prenuptial agreement, you're not giving up those types of rights.
So what should be the key things that are in a prenup then?
Well, the key things are, first of all, we're going to have full disclosure. Here's what I own. Here's what you own, and then you need to decide what happens if 10 years we get divorced. Are you in agreement that I would keep the farm? Are you in agreement that you would keep your business? I mean, that type of thing. And we can put on all sorts of things. We can get creative. Let's say that that somebody says, well, I'm marrying you and I'm not going to divorce you. I'm going to be married to you for the rest of my life, you know, and that's what we all hope. Well, then maybe we'll put in there that in 10 years it's void. So if we're still married in 10 years, we're not this. It's not
you
worth
put an
anything.
expiration date on it?
Exactly.
Really?
Yeah, we can get creative. We also can put in there what happens if we start our own business during our marriage. What are we going to treat? How are we going to treat things that we do together? So we can be very creative. We almost always can address somebody's concerns so that they feel comfortable with it. But if you think you're going to get a big inheritance during your marriage, you're concerned about that, or you've got a family asset and you're concerned about that, or you've got a business, it just makes sense to go on ahead and fill one out. And it really doesn't have anything to do with how much you love the person or what you think the future is going to hold. Divorces are nasty, and it's not a pleasant process. So, you also can look at it that you're just agreeing, how are we both going to go forward if we do need to break up?
Can it be amended in the marriage, or once it's done, it's
Once it's done, so then you're starting to talk about a post-nuptial agreement, and in Iowa, those are not binding. The court,
really? Okay.
Right. The court will look at it as an agreement, but it's not binding if the court doesn't think it's fair, because a lot of times when people enter those agreements after they've gotten married, there's some type of pressure.
Something has happened.
Something's happened. Something's happened. If you and I are married and we're having problems, and I say to you, I'll stay with you, Lou, but you got to sign this agreement, then maybe you're signing it because you want to stay in the marriage.
Oh, so I wouldn't be getting half of the Baer Law Firm.
Exactly.
Well, then we're not getting married.
Oh, darn.
Okay.
Well, let's say you signed a prenup and you end up getting divorced. Can you still fight that prenup, or it's in black and white? There's
Good
no
question.
fighting it.
Yeah, so there are ways. I've been in that situation where I've tried to fight it, and where I've tried to defend it. So, number one, did you disclose everything? Number two, is it fair? Number three, was it signed within 6 weeks of the marriage? Because if it's signed outside of that time frame, there's an argument to challenge it. And then is it clear? We just recently did a divorce that. I read it. I had every lawyer in my office read it, and none of us could make heads or tails of it. and so our position, and our client, of course, didn't want it to be enforced. And we said, well, a judge, if you can't understand it, then it's a contract and it's not going to be enforced. And so we were able to actually get him out of it and get him a share of what we thought he was entitled to.
So what I'm taking away from this is find a lawyer that's able to do it properly, because even if you go through the process of doing a prenup and you can still argue it divorce post-wedding, then what's the point?
Right, exactly. So for instance, we have experience doing them. There are lots of law firms out there that have experience doing them. They're not that expensive. I think our starting rate's like $750 to sit down and do a standard prenup for somebody.
That was my next question, okay.
Yeah, and then what we do is we give a draft to the other person that you're going to get married to and say, look, you need to take this to an attorney and have it reviewed. And a lot of times there's a negotiation process, because we want to make sure it's fair, and we want to make sure that everybody shows up at the altar without a chip on their shoulder. We want to make sure that everybody's protected and feels comfortable.
That's easy to do.
I was going to say, do you have any recommendations, as opposed to being like, hey, honey, I went to a lawyer and here's a prenup, would you sign it, please?
Well, hopefully you have better communication skills than that. I mean, hopefully you're saying, hey, you know what, my parents are a little concerned because we have a farm that's been in the family, and they've asked me to get an agreement in place. Do you have an issue with that? If I get something, can I give it to you? Or, I've got my business I've worked really hard to build. I know you've told me that you would never want some of it, but can we just put that in writing? So, communication goes a long way.
Do you work with both sides?
Yeah, I work with both sides.
Okay.
Yeah, I draft them and I negotiate them and I try to get people in them and enforce them, and so.
Now, on the bottom of the prenup, do you have a coupon, and just in case they do get a divorce, so they get a discount on the divorce?
That's a good idea. See? He's the marketer.
I know. No, but I'll keep that in mind.
Okay, all right. There's your idea for the day.
There you go.
Look, it's a tear-off.
It's a tear-off. Dotted line. Here's where you find the Baer Law Office. It's right across from Vets, folks. It's been there forever. Go check it out. It's a really cool office, too. Really. And now, what are the seats in the front? Are those juror seats?
They're juror seats that we've had redone.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
It's really neat. So if nothing else,
you're
check out the
uncomfortable
seats.
from the minute you go in.
Well,
No, it's a nice place. It really is.
And if you just want to come in and talk with you guys, you're willing to do that for a set amount of time?
Absolutely. We offer a free 30-minute consultation.
Wonderful.
So
Let me ask you this. Do you think OJ was innocent?
We have a 4-hour show, but we don't have a longer
All
show
right.
to talk about that.
We'll cover that
Great
another
job.
time.
Thank you so much.
thank you.
We'll be right back. It is 8:53.